Hey everyone, welcome to Alpha to Sky. In this video, we will solve a few questions to deepen our understanding on the topics that we have covered so far. Let's get started. So here's the first question. According to the Chicago Convention, every contracting state has complete and exclusive sovereignty over the airspace above its territory. Which article states this? If you remember, the Chicago Convention had several articles, and the first article itself talks about the sovereignty, which means any country has exclusive rights over the airspace above its territory. So the correct answer here is Article 1. Which of the following documents must always be carried on board an aircraft for international flight? During international flights, there were several documents that were required in an aircraft. The list was mentioned in the articles of the Chicago Convention itself. Is it the airworthiness certificate, certificate of insurance, aircraft noise certificate, or the flight safety manual? So the correct answer here is the airworthiness certificate. So let's go through these documents that are to be carried in an aircraft quickly. So it was Article 29 of the Chicago Convention, which mentions the list of documents. First one is the aircraft registration certificate, the certificate of airworthiness. Then comes the crew member licenses, the journey logbook, passengers list containing embarkation on and disembarkation places, like where they are being boarded and deboarded, the radio station license if it is equipped with a radio apparatus, and the cargo manifest and detailed declaration if carrying cargo. So those are the 7 documents which are must to be carried in an international flight. Not by you, not as a passenger. This has to be carried by the crew members. Where is the ICAO's headquarters located? This is a very easy one. It is in Montreal, Canada. The Tokyo Convention 1963 primarily deals with what? Is it aviation safety standards, offenses committed on board aircraft, or liability in air transport, or is it the registration certificate? So the Tokyo Convention of 1963 covers the offenses committed on board aircraft. According to ICAO, a recommended practice is what? ICAO has several standard procedures and recommended practices. So, what is a recommended practice? Is it something mandatory for all member states? Is it binding only on the state that recommends it? Or is it an advisory intended to guide states for uniformity? Or is it applicable only to the aircraft manufacturers? So, a recommended practice is something which is recommended and not a mandatory thing to be followed. So it is an advisory intended to guide states for uniformity. So uniformity across states during an international flight. Which article of the Chicago Convention defines the nationality of aircraft? Is it the article 16, 17, 18, or 19? The article 17 is the one which defines the nationality of an aircraft. If you haven't watched the video with all these articles, I'll put a link here. You can go and watch. The Hague Convention of 1970 deals with what? So if you remember, the Hague Convention was mostly for the hijacking, which is also called the unlawful seizure of an aircraft. Right. According to the Montreal Convention of 1999, the liability of carriers for international passenger death or injury is unlimited, limited to SDR 113,100, or determined by the Warsaw Convention, or is it SDR to 250,000? So under the Montreal Convention of 1999, there is no fixed financial limit for compensation in case of passenger death or injury, but for damages up to 1,13,100 SDR, that is standard drawing rights, the airline must pay and cannot dispute the claim. They have to pay. They cannot dispute by saying that we were not negligent or something. But for amounts above this limit, the 1,13,100 SDR, the airline can avoid paying if they are able to prove that they were not negligent. right? So this is the limit below which they have to pay, and above which they pay only if they're not able to prove that they are not negligent, right? And if you're wondering what is SDR, so this is called standard drawing rights. It's like a virtual currency, which is a bucket of some other major currencies, which was discussed in an earlier video. So basically, it's an international reserve asset created by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and they're not actual currencies. Instead, their value is based on a basket of some major currencies, which is including the US dollar, the euro, Chinese yuan, Japanese yen, and the British pound. So that is what the SDR is. So the correct answer here is limited to SDR 113100. The Cape Town Convention primarily aims at, is it regulating aircraft noise, protecting creditors' interest, defining airspace sovereignty, or establishing the ICAO membership rules? So, Cape Town Convention, as we saw in the previous video, it helps the lenders, sellers feel safer in investing in an aircraft or an aircraft part. Basically, it helps, it gives confidence to the investors, right? The financiers or the investors. So the correct answer here is the it's protecting the creditors' interest in aircraft financing. Which of the following is not a freedom of the air? So freedom of the air is a very important topic, and you should know all the freedoms of air. Right to fly over a foreign country without landing, right to refuel in a country, right to transport passengers from a foreign country to home country, or right to operate domestic flights within a foreign country. So if you remember, the first freedom of air says that an aircraft can fly over another country without landing. That's the first freedom of air. Second freedom of air was that the aircraft can land for technical purposes only, which is maintenance or refueling. And the third freedom of air was you can transport passenger from your country to the other country, your country meaning the country of registration to the other country. Fourth freedom is just the opposite of the third one, which is bringing the passengers from other country to your country. And the fifth freedom of air was you can transport passengers between two countries if your country is the source or the destination. Basically, your country, the country of registration, is part of the route when you are transporting between two other countries. So the first one is the first freedom of air itself, and second one is the second freedom of air, which is right to refuel or right to land for technical purposes, and right to transport passengers from a foreign country. This is the fourth freedom of air. So right to operate domestic flights, this is known as cabotage, right? So this is not a freedom of air, and so the correct answer here is right to operate domestic flights within a foreign country. The Rome Convention 1952 relates to what? Offenses on board aircraft, damage caused by foreign aircraft on the surface, aircraft registration, or liability for dangerous goods. So the Rome Convention, as discussed in the previous video, it covers the damage caused by a foreign aircraft on the surface. Anything that causes damage to the victims on the ground by the foreign aircraft is covered under the Rome Convention. And it was later modified, it was later amended by the Montreal Protocol of 1971. An aircraft registered in India is flying over the airspace of the USA. Which statement is correct? Does India have complete control over the aircraft while in US airspace because the aircraft is registered in India? So does it have complete control? Does US has sovereign control over its airspace? Does ICAO directly control the flight, or the aircraft can operate without US ATC clearance? If you remember the first article of the Chicago Convention, which talks about the sovereignty, a country or a state has complete sovereignty over the airspace, over its territory, right? And that is why USA has sovereign control over its airspace. That's the correct answer. Which ICAO body is responsible for setting international standards? So we had seen the structure of ICAO in the previous video. If you have not, you can go through using the link here. So there was an assembly, council, the different commissions, and the secretariat. So the Air Navigation Commission is the one which is responsible for setting international standards. I would recommend you to go through the video for the structure of ICAO to better understand the working of the several bodies inside the ICAO and their functioning. Right. The Warsaw Convention of 1929 governs what? The airworthiness standards, liability in international carriage of passengers, baggage, and cargo, aircraft registration, or the freedoms of air. The Warsaw Convention of 1929 covers the liability in international carriage of passengers, baggage, and cargo. So it defines various limits, as we saw the SDR, right, standard drawing rights. So it defines the liability based in terms of the SDR. There's a minimum liability limit that is defined in the Warsaw Convention. The Air Service Transit Agreement allows what? Landing rights for cargo only, non-stop flights over a foreign country without landing, establishment of airlines in foreign country, or sale of tickets in foreign markets. This Air Service Transit Agreement has the two freedoms of air, the first one and the second one. The first one is flying over other country without landing, and then second one is landing for technical purposes only. So here the second one is the answer, which is non-stop flights over a foreign country without landing. That is the first freedom of air. Which Montreal Convention or protocol amended the Warsaw Convention for electronic documentation? Is it the Montreal Convention of 1999, Montreal Protocol of 1955, Montreal Protocol of 1975, or the Montreal Protocol of 1988? Here the correct answer is 1999. But let's go through all these Montreal conventions and protocols once to understand the difference, because there are so many of them, right? So let's understand the difference. So starting with Montreal Convention of 1971, which is also called the Montreal Convention for the suppression of unlawful act against the safety of civil aviation. So its main purpose was to prevent acts like bombing, sabotage, and attacks on aircraft in service, and it is related to the security and unlawful interference, and focuses on punishing people who damage or endanger the aircraft. That was Montreal Convention 1971. Then comes the Montreal Protocol of 1988, which is a supplement to the previous convention, that is in 1971. This is also related to security, and it focuses on protection of airports. So the previous one was only protecting the aircraft in flight, and this one is protecting the airports, not just the aircraft. Montreal Convention of 1999, which modernizes the rules for passenger injury or death or baggage and cargo liability. Basically talks about the liability. And this is very important because there are several questions based on this topic, mostly on the liability limit, which is the 1,13,100 STR standard drawing rights. And then we have all the protocols from 1 to 4, which were in 1975, and they basically add the missing parts to all these conventions. They amend and update the Warsaw Convention. They also talk about the liability and also the documentation. They modify old Warsaw rules, but are mostly replaced by the Montreal Convention of 1999. That was the difference between all these conventions and protocols. Next, the Aircraft Authority of India primarily functions under, is it the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, DGCA, or is it the ICAO? So the AAI, Airports Authority of India, functions under the Ministry of Civil Aviation. Under the Chicago Convention, a state may require aircraft flying over its territory to obtain special landing permission, to comply with its rules of the air and air traffic regulations, register temporarily within the state, or carry only national cargo. So under the Chicago Convention, we know that as per the Article 1, a country has complete authority over the airspace over its territory, and that is why they can require any aircraft flying over their territory to comply with the rules and regulations of their state. That's it. We covered so many important questions. I hope you liked it and it deepened your understanding on these topics. If you have any doubts, please post them in the comment section and see you in the next one. Thank you.